Why is everybody whispering?
Guess we're not allowed to. I'm gonna leave. Okay, so I guess while we're talking, you just talk to me. You could forget about everything else that's around.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess we could start with maybe just a quick introduction, your name, maybe where you were born, your birthday.
Okay. Joan Bresnahan Willix. I was born at St. Anne's Hospital in Chicago, October 30th, 1940, the day before Halloween. And I missed being a witch by one day.
That's close, though. So I guess, let's see. I guess I'll just read off some of the questions I have here. No particular order, but I guess we start about talking about your dad, David. Did he ever talk about his childhood? Any stories about growing up in Ireland? Any specific stories?
Yeah, he did. He talked about it. He was one of 11 kids. His father died when he was 11, and they were kind of poor. And he told me some of their antics. When he was about 12 years old, one of their neighbors died, and they always had the funerals at home, and he laid out on the table or whatever. And he and his friend put a sandwich in the dead guy's hand and strung a string out the window, and when the people came in to visit, they pulled the string in the arm stand up, put the hand with the sandwich in it. And he said he got in trouble. They were chased by the adults. So, and he also told me stories that he saw mermaids, and I think he told that lie so many times he believed it. And the banshees one time chased him when he was riding his bike, and they tried to bite his feet. So those are stories that come quickly to my mind. I can't think of anything else offhand. My dad was a very calm, easygoing guy, sweet man, a great dad. He always talked about the old country, and whenever he was going somewhere, we would say, "Where you going, Dad?" "I'm going to the old country. Want to come?" You need to prompt me, John. I can't.
Oh, yeah, well,
yeah.
Exactly. I'll give you some breathing room, so I'm not stepping over your words, but definitely have a lot of stuff you mentioned. I have other questions that, to dive deeper into some of those things, but yeah, I guess there's some great, stories dealing with some of the folklore, but he talked about kind of his day-to-day life, what he, did for work, or, how
They
he
were
spent his time.
They were farmers, and they did farming. He was we talked about this last night. You probably didn't hear it. He was a violinist, and he taught himself. He never had any lessons, and he would play at all the dances. And he's a young man. He said sometimes he'd like to just dance and talk to the girls. So he'd wrap his thumb in a big Band-Aid or big bandage, so he wouldn't have to play the violin. He talked about that. He didn't talk a ton about what he did in Ireland. He did belong to the IRA, and he stayed in jail one night. He had a tattoo on his hand right here of the IRA. He talked about England, how much they really didn't like them, and they really didn't. So I think my parents left Ireland just after the South got their freedom. They came in the early 20s. So I have a story to tell about my mother and father together.
Absolutely.
So their farms were very close to each other in Ireland, and they wanted to get married. And my mother's family had 16 kids, and the father was alive. And they did well, so for what they were, they thought they were well off. So my dad, as I said, his dad died at 11, so they were poor. And my mother's dad, so your great-grandfather O'Sullivan, said no, he wasn't good enough. So my mom immigrated to New York, and my dad came to Chicago. And one Labor Day weekend, he went to New York, and he married her and brought her back. She was the only one from her family in Chicago. So that's their romance. That's kind of neat. Kind of a neat story.
Do they know each other in Ireland?
Yeah, they wanted to get married in Ireland, and
Okay.
her father said no. So there was that story.
Did they emigrate at different times or around the
Around the same time, both around 24 years old. Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to think more.
Well, yeah, I guess with the first question, you could talk about your mother, Hannah. If she ever talked about, growing up in Ireland, any stories about,
She
on her
did.
side.
She also said that, after she lived here a long time, that Wisconsin reminded her of Ireland with all the pine trees in it, and I never thought that Ireland had pine trees, but it does. She also talked about going down to the creek or river to get water. They had no running water. She talked a lot about her siblings, but she was the fifth youngest of 16. So a lot of the older ones, they were kind of gone out of the house. So she really knew all of them. She never talked a ton about what they did as kids. They only went to school till fifth grade, both of them fifth grade. I remember my dad, when we were in grade school, we'd bring our history books and geography books home, and he would read them he wanted to learn. And he loved that. Okay, I am nervous. I don't know why.
Well, no need to be. I mean, doing great so far. I mean, stuff I've not heard of before, so this was fantastic. So, but I guess here's one maybe I should start off with, but how would you describe your parents in just in a few sentences in terms of their personality, in terms of their interests or, hobbies?
Okay, as I said, my dad was a very nice, easygoing man, very focused on family, hard worker. He was a jack of all trades, master of none, did a lot of handiwork, built a room addition on our house all by himself. When he was in his 70s, he built a garage in his backyard by himself. I remember pulling in the driveway and seeing him sticking through the roof with a circular saw in his hand. God, at 70, I would never have done that. My mother, she was, everybody has a poor rep of my mom, I think. My mother was a great mom. She was a wonderful woman. My brother died when she was 64. It did change her. She wasn't the same after that. She got to be a bit crabby, but she was a wonderful woman. She raised us and she loved us. They gave us a good life. My dad was a bus driver. He didn't make a ton of money, but we always owned our own home. He had a car. We all went to Catholic schools, and we had a good life.
Did your mother work at all, or she?
She did not. No, she raised. They don't. Yeah, and that generation didn't. Yeah. They didn't work. She was a telephone operator in New York before she came here. The ones you see in the movies where they're plugging in the like that. Yeah, she did that. So she didn't work after that. Okay.
Because how long was she in New York before she?
Just a couple of years.
Just a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Was all her family was there. They all immigrated except one. So 15 of them were in New York. So after she left, only 14.
I guess that was one of my other questions about your parents emigrating. Did they go stay with family when they first came out, and
yes.
Did they leave with any family or?
Yeah, you had to have a sponsor. So I'm not sure what the order was when my mother came, but all her brothers and sisters were in New York, and that's who she stayed with. And my dad had 2 brothers and a sister here in Chicago, and he stayed with them. And then really quickly, I think they just kind of went off on their own. They stayed with their family, and there was Irish neighborhoods, Italian neighborhoods, German, kind of like it is now, with the Spanish neighborhoods. And where we live, we have a big contingent of Polish people. Polish people, Hispanic. It was the same back then. I was born on the west side of Chicago and raised there. We were considered West Side Irish Democrats. That was our little niche. So, okay.
So did you grow up in a fairly Irish neighborhood?
Yeah, all Irish.
All Irish.
Yeah.
Because was there a name for that neighborhood specifically?
No, it was Austin. It was in Chicago, in the city. It was called Austin, and and there's a South Side Irish as well. That's a big contingent as well. But Meryl, your grandmother, she was born in the same area, and it was all Irish for you too, Marilyn, right?
All Irish in the neighborhood.
No,
all Irish.
Yeah, all Irish.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess here's a question Dick handed me. How did your brother die?
My younger brother? Well, you talking about David?
Yes.
Yeah.
He died. He was a Navy pilot and was going from one air base to another. He was killed in a car crash. 24 years old.
So what year was that?
What year?
Yeah.
1962. And the next year, are you familiar with President Kennedy?
Oh yeah, of course.
Just then, about a year and a few days later, he was assassinated. So it was close. That was very horrible. Kind of pretty much like with Dominic.
I'm sure, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, young, very young. But I guess bringing up, I guess JFK, that was kind of a big deal, I think, for like Irish Americans. I guess what was the
whole country, really.
well, yeah, but I guess what was your kind of family experience with that? Were you big I guess supporters of him?
Well,
or-
my family at that time, they were Democrat, and he was a Democrat, and yeah, they voted for him. I was too young to vote when I think I was 20, and he had to be 21, so I wasn't able to vote for him. But it was a big blow to the country when he was assassinated. And I know everybody knows where they were when it happened. And I was at work in the where we would have lunch, and a friend of mine who was from Scotland, he came into the lunchroom with tears running down his face, and he said, "You're not going to believe what happened to your president. He got killed." And it was a shock. I don't think today people wouldn't have the same feelings that they did then. It was something.
Oh, definitely.
And my brother David, when he was killed, Peggy and I were the last ones home, and I was sleeping and the doorbell rang, and I went to answer it, and it was a telegram. We regret to inform you, that kind of thing. So I went to tell my mom and dad, and my mom she went nuts. And then the next morning, 2 officers came to the door to inform us. So it was really something. And I was only, let's see, David was 24. I was only 22 years old. So when Dominic died, I really could feel the connection, and especially for Bessie, because she was like me.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, so young as well. It's incredibly tragic.
Yeah, really tragic.
But I guess growing up, it's in an all kind of Irish neighborhood, where there kind of Irish cultural activities or events that you participated in,
Yeah.
music or
Yeah, my
sports?
parents, they belonged to a club called the Patrick Pierce Club, and every month they had a big dance. It was more a social thing, but it was all of their friends that they met from Ireland, and they had this big dance one Saturday every month, and all the kids came. It was a big bash, and we loved it. And we did all the Irish dancing. They had fiddle players and all live music. So the men, the women, everybody danced with the kids. It was a ball. We used to look so forward to it. That's one thing. There is a story I wanted to tell you about my my mother's family. So my mother is your great grandmother. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So her mother is my great grandmother, and her dad, who was my mother's grandfather, had the 2 children. He only had 2 kids. My great grandmother. No, she's my grandmother. I don't know. Yeah, she's my grandmother. And her son. And one day he just decided to leave Ireland. He just ditched him. He came to America, and he settled in Michigan, but he fought with the Indians against Custer. And then he wrote many, many books about Michigan. His name was Cahill. And my mother had a cousin from Ireland who used to come and visit us once a year, and he told me that story, and I thought it was bull crap. I thought, oh, here's another Irish war,
Yeah.
So I think he knew that I didn't believe him. So when he went back to Ireland, he looked it up, and he had photocopies made and sent them to me. So I have it in black and white, so it was a true story. So he was a rapscallion.
Wow. So I guess you.
So he only had 2 kids, but his daughter had 16.
Wow.
My mother being one of them. It's unbelievable.
I guess lucky for us, better chance of us being
Yeah.
being born. But
But isn't that something about how he just left Ireland and just, from what I understand, he just didn't really care. He had wanderlust and left.
then that would have been probably in like the mid 1800s or late
You know,
1800s.
John, my history is not
Oh,
too
yeah.
great as far as dates. Yeah, I'm not sure when that was.
But with the general, I mean, if you're,
Yeah, the general
if your mother's grandfather or something, that's really going pretty far back.
Yeah. So it was my great grandfather. So probably your great
Great-great,
grandfather. Yeah. Okay.
So another thing I was curious about was, if either your parents had any Irish language or any phrases, or if they ever used it or mentioned it around you guys.
My mother not so much. my dad, they didn't speak Irish. It was outlawed, and it was punishable by the English. So my dad had some sayings and mostly swear words.
Yeah.
Pogmahome, we all know that one. Some names like Daheen is David. That was my dad's name. But no, not much in the language. Unfortunately, they just don't use it.
Yeah, I knew from that region of Ireland it was, colonized early on, and that the language had been eradicated, pretty compared to other parts, like Southwest Kerry or something that was holding on to it. But yeah, it was just definitely.
I do remember a story that it was also my mom's family. We were in Ireland. Our first trip was probably 32 or 3 years ago. So we went to my mother's farm, which we couldn't see this last time. We couldn't find it. And my uncle was dead. So he was the oldest son who inherited the farm. That's why everybody else immigrated. And his wife was alive and his son, who was my cousin. So we went and we visited with them extensively. And so her name was Anne. So Aunt Anne told us a story that when they were young, my grandmother was sitting in her kitchen. So her son was a policeman, and at that time, before the Irish got their freedom in the South, they worked for the English if you were a cop. So the neighbors didn't like it, and they came in the house with shotguns. They were going to kill him. And she stepped in front of him, and she said, if you kill him, you have to kill me first. And they were their neighbors.
Yeah.
But that's how much they hated the English suppression. So they said, okay, we won't kill him, but he has to leave. He has to immigrate immediately. So within a very, very short time, he had to leave. That's there was a story that she told me while we were in Ireland. So the farms are small. You saw my dad's. It doesn't hold 16 kids or 15 kids or whatever. So but they were suppressed, as you know.
Certainly.
They didn't like it.
So I guess relating to that, you mentioned it a little bit before about your father being a member of the IRA. Did he ever talk about that in more detail, about his experience?
John, he didn't tell much. He was kind of quiet about it. He admitted that he was with them. He never said whether he did any raiding or, I know he spent one night in jail, so that's done something, to get picked up. But nothing bad enough that it would have kept him. So I don't know. They're very quiet about that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Pretty much like people that go off to war.
Oh, yeah. Especially with the whole Civil War aspect of it as well. There was a lot of, family fighting family, kind of bad blood, that.
Neighbor, I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah.
In terms of, So I guess you probably didn't, did you ever talk about, Irish politics, in more detail about, the treaty or, anything?
He did. Are you making notes, Dick? More so in passing. It was very, very well known that he did not like not the English today, but the English then. They really did not like them. They were nasty people at that time. The soldiers would kill, kind of like, just for no reason. Just because you were Irish, you were a scumdog. So they didn't really get into politics much.
Not surprising.
But when we grew up, I've said this often to friends, I didn't know I wasn't from Ireland. And I grew up in an Irish house. Both my parents were from Ireland. They had the brogues. I thought I was Irish, until I got older and I knew I was an American. So I like my heritage a lot, as you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I guess you did mention a little bit about going back to Ireland with, did you ever, talk about, did you ever, your parents or you with them go back to Ireland after they had emigrated? They
didn't go back until 1960, I think around 1968. So they were in their, I don't know, they were in their 60s. I'm not sure how old they were. Yeah, they were in their 60s when they went back for the first time. And, my aunt also said to me when we were in Ireland, of all the kids that immigrated, nobody came back. And she thought that was terrible. And I said, it is terrible, but you have to remember, they left and then there was a depression. And then they were all raising families. And nobody had much money. They really couldn't afford to go back. But can you imagine having 15 kids and never seeing them again? I mean, that's tough. Yeah.
And the country you love that you fought for, you know.
And they always did love their country, although they loved America too. You know, so yeah.
So I guess did you go with them on that trip?
I did not. Oh, I couldn't wait for them to go so I could have parties.
Yeah.
No, that's the truth. I couldn't wait for them to go. They asked if I wanted to go. I said, oh no, you guys go. I had parties. It was fun. Stupid now that I think about it. I was young. I didn't know any better. You know, I would love to have gone with them now that I think about it. So you guys did the right thing. You went with your parents.
Absolutely.
And your grandma.
Absolutely. Very, very blessed, you know, to have gone through that.
Joan, do you remember the story about what he said about the Count Mountbatten when he was assassinated?
About what?
Count Lord Mountbatten when he was assassinated by the Irish. And what your father said about it.
About who?
Lord Mountbatten.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't even know who that is.
He orchestrated Bloody Sunday. And the Irish, what they did was they ambushed him and assassinated him.
I'm sorry, I don't remember it.
Yeah, and the only time I ever heard him talk about politics.
Maybe he talked about it to you. He never talked about it to
He
me.
said, I said, wasn't that terrible? And he said, I wish I was there to pull the trigger.
Okay.
Rightfully so. So I guess with that, I guess their return trip to Ireland, did they ever talk about that, or where they went, or did they kind of go back to their hometowns, or did they?
They didn't travel. My mom talked a lot about Connemara, which was not very far.
Yeah.
No, they didn't really go anywhere except here.
Yeah.
You know, and they were pretty young when they came here. I mean, I can't even imagine at 24 years old picking up from here and going overseas and never coming back. That had to be tough. And they didn't go by airplane.
Yeah.
They went by ship, and it took a long time. And they went through Ellis Island, and that's where Brosnahan became Bresnahan. Every single brother that came through the island, the name was changed. They didn't change it themselves. The people in Ellis Island did it. So Richard, my son, he was in Ellis Island. He and Brienne, they looked up both my mom and dad. They couldn't find my mom, but they found. Oh, wait. Wait a minute. Which one? They found one of them. I think they found my dad, but not my mother. So they found his name and where it was changed from the O to E.
That's what I figured. I always, that's what I had assumed, but didn't know for sure.
Yeah.
So I think at Ellis Island was it? I guess. Would you tell the clerk your name? They would write it down for you. So that's kind of where the confusion came in.
Yeah. Well, with the bro, who knows what a silent Brosnahan,
Yeah.
and but it was individual. Each brother that came through, the same thing happened to them. So they were all Brosnahan, and they were all changed to Bresnahan. So they just kept it.
Interesting. I wonder if it was because there was he's a famous baseball player. I think maybe around that time that was Roger Bresnahan spelled.
Was it at that time?
I believe so. I think he was in the early 20th century, so maybe that was what
It could be.
They
Could be,
heard
or
that, and then they, it was like the baseball player,
Yeah. Because you don't hear the name Bresnahan that often. It's not as common
Yeah.
as Brosnahan or Brosnan. Yeah, but that's what happened.
I definitely am. I was curious about that because I knew he was born with the O in there, not the.
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was. It was. And I believe on his birth certificate, which I have, it does say Brosnahan.
Yeah, I think I've seen on the Ancestry.com.
Oh, have you?
Yeah,
Okay.
some documents from Ireland, and it was BROS.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess. Let's see. What about how would you? I guess celebrate holidays. Are there big? I guess in terms of any family traditions in terms of celebrating Christmas or Easter,
Yeah, St. Patrick's Day.
and St. Patrick's Day, and any other kind of big days that.
Yeah. They did become very Americanized, and our Christmases, I would say, There was no particular Irish ritual. Very religious, of course. I mean, Christmas was about the birth of Jesus, not presents. And we did get them. House was decorated like every other American house. But St. Patrick's Day was, my mother always made an Irish meal. It wasn't always particularly corned beef, because when my mom and dad lived in Ireland, corned beef was not a big deal. It was given to the pigs. It was a big, horrible piece of meat. And they would have maybe smoked butt, which I hated. And my mother always made a salad every year, and it was green, white, and orange. She had a banana, first green lettuce, and then she put a banana wrapped in walnuts inside of a half a peach, so it would be the colors of the Irish flag. So we had that every year. And whenever we could, see any traditional Irish dancing or go to one of those clubs that they belonged to, that was celebrated big time. And I don't believe that St. Patrick's Day at that time was celebrated like that in Ireland. But because they could do it here, they did. So there no particularly Irish celebrations in our house. We just thought we were in Ireland inside our little house.
Definitely. So I guess for the just the times when they did do some these Irish cultural events, I guess were they active I guess dancers or
yeah, they loved to dance. Yeah, at those dances we'd go to, they would dance. And my dad, he would always play music. And we took Irish dancing. Peggy, myself, and my brother David. He quit. He thought it was for girls. And my dad always played the fiddle for us to practice. So it was, and whenever he had parties and stuff, they always played all the Irish music, and it was a very Irish household.
So he did keep up with music throughout his life.
He stopped playing when he got older. I think maybe he thought he wasn't good enough anymore. You'd have to really, poke at him to do it, and then he kind of quit. He didn't do it anymore. And Peggy's husband, who is Italian, and they didn't really like that when she married him because he wasn't Irish, but they got to like him a whole lot. And he was a fiddle player too, so my dad loved to listen to him. And Sam, you've met Sam, haven't you? Peggy's husband, Sam, Lisa's dad?
Perhaps, I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, anyway, he learned a lot of the Irish music from my dad, and he would play it. And my dad really liked that. But it was fun to come home and hear the fiddle being played, and he'd play little tunes for us kids when we were little, like Pop Goes the Weasel, and he'd pull the strings, and it was fun. It was fun.
What about any singing? Did either your parents ever sing any tunes?
Only in groups, not by themselves. Yeah, they'd sing all the old Irish songs that are traditional. Yeah, they did. Yep.
So I guess in groups, you mean like at a party?
Parties. Yeah.
After some drinks.
I never heard them walking around the house singing.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. Yeah, at parties. Yeah, all the parties were very Irish.
And I'm sure with a lot of other people from Ireland as well.
Well, a lot of their friends they knew from Ireland, and then they met new people here that were from Ireland as well. But all their friends, they were Irish. I don't know that some people in the neighborhood that weren't Irish were friends with them. But I would have to say all their best friends and their family, they were all Irish. So my dad had two brothers and a sister that lived in Chicago. One brother moved back to Ireland when I was young, but the brother and sister, they stayed here. So we saw them a lot. And then my mom's family, they visited a lot. Maybe a husband, a brother and his wife would come, and they'd stay a week. So we always had a lot of company. I never slept in my bed all year. I always had to give it up for a mattress on the floor for a relative from New York. But I loved that. It was fun. So, and as kids, you would sit around and listen to all the stories. I don't remember them all now because it was such a long time ago. But it was a great upbringing. I enjoyed it. I had a great life.
Very Catholic.
Very Catholic.
Good.
Let's see. What else do I get?
Oh, I remember too, John, you might be interested in this, when we lived in a house and had a backyard with no garage, and my father built us a swing set back there in a big sandbox. He was really handy. He could build anything. That's just a little throw-in.
Who was his laborer, John?
I can't hear you.
Who was your father's laborer?
Me. I was the helper. I used to paste the wallpaper for when he wallpapered. Yeah.
Do you have any other memories helping him out, working with him?
Yeah, I loved working with him. And I was the only one that really wanted to do it. Nobody else really cared. The boys, they were out playing ball and whatever they were doing, working. Yeah. Well, we had a two-flat, so we lived on the first floor, and the second floor we rented. So he would go up there and wallpaper and paint, and that's where I love to do that myself, and that's where I learned it. So he would put 2 horses with a door over it and lay out the wallpaper, and then it had to be pasted with a brush. So now I would do the pasting, and then he'd fold it over. He taught me how to wallpaper, how to paint. And then we bought our first house. We bought from them in Elmhurst. It was a small house, and I was wallpapering and painting, and he came over and he said, "You're too much of a perfectionist." He said, "You don't have to have it that good." It was funny. It was fun. Yeah.
Did you have any other kind of stuff? Any handy things? I guess besides painting or wallpaper.
Yeah, like I said, he built 2 additions on his house, and not 1 addition on the house in a garage. He was very, very handy. I remember one time, this 2-flat we had, it had an attic, so it was like 3 stories, and he was up working on the gutters, and he had a ladder, up against the building, and I was in the upstairs attic looking out, helping. I know I was holding the ladder or something, and he had hung the hammer on the ladder, and then when on the way down it fell off and hit him in the head. So when I ran down 3 flights of stairs, and I could see the flight of stairs that he had come up to go, and there was blood all over the place. So the hammer took a chunk out of his head. It scared the crap out of me. I was a kid, But no, I loved that. I learned a lot from him, and he and I were very close. And I was the last one to leave the house too. And when I told him I was getting married, he said, "Who's going to bring me my tea at night?" Because every night after work, I would have a cup of tea with him in the front room when we watched TV. And on Saturdays, he loved to go to Sears, and I would go with him. And then we would stop at a little burger place on Central Avenue, and he'd give a burger. That was his favorite thing to do. And I was with him. It was fun.
Yeah, Dick was telling me about, he's a big fan of burgers. Do you have any more, I guess,
he
share
was.
about that, about his
Well, my mother never made things like hamburgers. She did when we got older, but burgers were not really good food for you. They were farmers. They wanted you to eat meat, potatoes, 2 vegetables, and most of them were horrible. As a kid, I didn't like the potatoes. I didn't like the vegetables. And Peggy and I used to have to wear aprons to the table, and we'd fight for the one with the pocket, because we put the food we didn't want in the pocket and then flush it down the toilet. Even the dog wouldn't eat it. I'm trying to think. You're really probing my memory.
I guess what kind of vegetables did you usually eat?
Brussels sprouts. I hated them. Oh my God. Brussels sprouts, cabbage, beans, any kind of vegetable, really. Broccoli, cauliflower, pretty much carrots, the things that we eat today, peas, But that was a big portion of your meal. And then we did eat healthy. Oh, I got a story. I forgot about this. Every day she made oatmeal or farina for breakfast. In the winter, I hated both of them. So every morning I would eat it. And then I was always late for school. So I'd have to go to the principal's office to get a pink slip because I was late. So I'd walk in and they said, "Oh, you didn't eat your cereal again, huh?" I mean, why would you make somebody eat something that they hate every day? I never figured that out. But
And you never got a liking for it?
To this day, I wouldn't eat it, no. It's probably not bad, but I wouldn't even touch it. That's so... Yeah, my dad, he liked his burgers. He did. And he didn't like chili for dinner. He said, soup is not a meal. That's what he thought chili was soup. He said, that's not a meal. He liked his meat and potatoes.
A classic meal.
Yep.
I guess, what about, maybe sports? Were they either your parents or your family interested in any of that?
Oh yeah, you heard about the baseball. I'm sure your grandfather loved the Cubs, And my dad and my brother David were Sox fans. And I remember in high school, they'd be working out in the yard. And do you know what a transistor radio is?
Yeah.
Okay. So they'd each have one in their back pocket, and they'd turn them louder and louder to drown out the other guy. So you'd hear strike one. 2 minutes later, strike two. And I thought, God, what a boring game. And for years, I hated baseball because of that. It was so boring. And they would argue all the time about the Cubs and the Sox. Everybody liked the Notre Dame football. Everybody in the family liked that. That was Holy Mother football. And everybody liked the Bears. You know. Yeah, they were very big into sports. Not soccer, that wasn't big. You know,
What about any, I guess, Irish games? Did they ever talk about that, or was that
No, it wasn't.
around in Chicago?
No, it really wasn't. You mean like...
Like Gaelic football or hurling?
No, it still isn't as far as I know. No. Just American sports, but they liked it. They were avid fans. I am now, but back then I just thought it was dumb. Yeah.
So you're saying when your father was a White Sox fan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And my brother David was, and your grandfather was a Sox. I mean, no, he was the Cub fan. They were the
So
Sox
that was
fans.
the conflict there between that.
Yeah. And they all, of course, they all thought they were right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No runs, no hits, no errors, nobody cares.
Let's see, I think I might have gone through the questions I have written down. Let me just double check. I guess here's one that maybe you kind of touched on, but did your parents stay, I guess, connected? I know they didn't visit Ireland until much later, but did they have correspondence with their family back
Yes,
home?
they did. Yeah, they did write back and forth. Not a terrible amount from Ireland because really nobody left there except one brother on my mother's side. I'm not sure how many from my father's side. I know they had the four of them were Chicago, and I know there was one in Napa. And my mother's side, I think, communicated more because men weren't really big on writing. At least I didn't think they were. But I remember getting letters often. Not me, you know. I mean, coming in the mail, and you could tell where it was coming from by the handwriting. You know, so lots of letters from New York, some letters from Ireland. Yeah, they communicated. And my mom talked a lot about her mother and her father and when she was young and her family. My dad, not as much. But everybody that lived in Chicago, we saw a lot. You know, my dad's sister was Hannah, and his brothers were Jim and Mike. And they're the only ones I knew because they're the only ones in Chicago. And they didn't travel back then, you know. I think my mom and dad went to New York a few times, but mostly they came to our house. And it was fun. We always liked it. Get a house full of people.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I definitely heard about, a lot of Irish immigrants would often, send maybe little, gifts or money back home. Did you ever hear anything about that?
You know, I don't think they sent money because they didn't have much. And raising 5 kids. And I think that was the case with most of them. You know, they were kind of just getting by. As far as gifts, I probably, if they did, I didn't know. You know, a lot of things go over your head when you're young. You don't pay any attention. Sometimes now when we think about it, not then, unfortunately. Yeah, so I don't know about gifts.
Yeah. Let's see. Missing anything else?
Father was a bus driver.
Do you want to pose a question, Dick?
Yeah. Your father was a bus driver, Joan?
Yeah,
He worked a split shit every day? Shit?
split shift, yeah.
I did it.
What about it?
No, just what your father did to, you were talking about.
Oh, I
money.
think you told my dad he was a bus driver, and he he had the same route for a lot of years, and he did work what they call the swing shift. So in the morning, and then he'd go early morning, and he'd come home for lunch, and he'd take a nap, then he'd go back, and he'd be home around 6 o'clock. That was pretty neat. So he was home for lunch every day when us kids were home for lunch, during school. So that was neat. Oh, and I remember one time, my sister Peggy, she was a Dickens. She used to steal the car. She didn't, probably 15 years old, 14. And she was driving the car down the street one day, and my dad was walking this way, and she just kept going. I'm sure, I don't know what my father thought, but he probably was like, what the hell? You know, here's my little sister who was about this big. And back then the cars were humongous, you know, an old Packard or... David, my brother, just drove the car one day too, and police brought him home because they couldn't see the driver. Yeah. Yeah, I was a chicken. I never did stuff like that. I was a goody two-shoes. Was there still whispering?
I was just saying, can we talk about the Troubles? Do you have any memories of the Troubles?
I don't
Not you,
have...
but like, or their stories.
Just, you know, just remember them talking about it and not liking it. You know, they didn't really do much about it. If, you know, lots of times people did and nobody knew. So if he did anything about it, I didn't know. He would talk about it and how bad it was and that kind of thing, but not much more than that. My dad was a very quiet man as well. The Troubles, it's tough
Did
to
they ever tell
say.
you, Joan, why they came to America? Why they?
Yeah, because they had nowhere else to go. Their farm would go to one person, and there was all these kids, and where were they going to go? Where were they going to work? There were no jobs in Ireland. Yeah, they had to leave to live. That was the whole point. How many people left Ireland, especially during the potato famine? Oh my God!
I mean, I think there's more. I think there's 30 million Irish diaspora in the world compared to 5 million still in the country.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's Irish and they claim to be Irish all over the world. You know, and it's interesting. And I don't know if you guys noticed it when you were in Ireland. There were several places that we would stop and. Maybe a restaurant, and we'd have a young lady as a waitress, and they always knew you're American. I mean, we have that look and air about us, and they were very nice, and we always tried to be nice as well, and not be the ugly American. And they do not consider us Irish. You know, they think, oh, you people, you come back, you've got a grandmother that was from Ireland, you think you're Irish. You're not. Like I find that highly insulting. I do. I was like. I would never argue with them. That's what way they feel. They're not going to change. But that was hurtful to me because I do feel Irish. My parents were born. And what if they didn't immigrate? I would have been born there.
Yeah.
You know, but they don't have the same feeling about that we do. So they should come here and live here a while and learn about it.
Well, yeah. Well, I think we could probably both learn more about each other. Because I definitely agree. I think the diaspora. I mean, these people didn't emigrate because they really wanted to. Like you
Not
said, it's
really.
out of necessity.
Yeah, exactly. They had to. Yeah. I think, Avril from Westport,
Yeah.
I talked to her about it a bit, and she had a little bit better, she's a little bit older too. She's a little bit better feeling for how we feel. And I remember her mom, Geraldine, she was saying that most people that stayed at her place that were American, she didn't like them very much. And she probably told you the same thing. So when we were leaving, she paid us a high compliment. She said, "You guys are really nice for Americans," or something like that. Not insulting, but she gave us a high compliment that she really thought we were nice people. So there must be a lot of Americans that go there. They act like they own the place, and that's too bad.
Well, yeah, that's why I could only totally understand, the native Irish perspective on Irish Americans. There's a lot of, they're much more American than Irish, at this point,
Yeah.
They lost kind of like that connection, and have some
But it's too bad they don't feel the emotional pull that we feel.
Yeah.
And they don't understand that. And they wouldn't understand unless they went through it themselves. But that really kind of surprised me. I was really surprised to hear that. That they would voice it to us as well.
Yeah.
They didn't hide it.
Your mother and father, Joan, died quite close to each other.
My mom and dad, they died a month apart. Yeah. And this is interesting. My brother David died on November 3rd. My father died on November 3rd. And David, your uncle, he was at the funeral for my dad, and he saw the headstone. He says, "I'm never getting out of bed on November 3rd. Do you remember that, Marilyn?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, God. Me too. I think about that often. I think my dad was waiting for that day. I think he wanted to die on that day. And I think it's possible. I really do. Because he was very bad. He should have died sooner, and that's the day he died.
He did want to die.
That was a terrible shock for my parents when my brother was killed. Not fun.
I'm sure.
I mean, it's 60 years later. I still think about it. Okay.
Let's see, what was it you who whispered in my
Me.
ear? Or
I've always, Grandpa in his garden
Which is-
and smoking a cigar or a cigarette.
Cigarette.
Which
Why
is,
do
I can't hear
Oh,
her.
his garden and smoking a
He was
cigarette.
big with his garden.
Oh, he
the
loved his
basement.
garden. His garden. And smoking in the basement?
No, I remember him, that was like his safe space.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. That was later on when he was way older. He loved his cigarettes, and my mom really didn't like the smell, so he would go down to the basement and smoke. Yeah. But Janine, you're right about the garden though. He always had a garden, probably the size of a 2-car garage, because he was a farmer, and he'd grow a lot of things and spread them out to all the neighbors. And again, as he got older, he didn't do that, and that's mostly what we remember is when we were older. Unfortunately, when you're young, you don't appreciate that stuff. So when he stopped doing his gardens, and I started doing it, where we lived, I wasn't that very good at it, and then it's hard work. You know, I would grow tomatoes and stuff, and half the time they wouldn't even grow. So he was good at it.
were there kind of certain things you like to grow, or?
He always grew tomatoes. I think he tried corn a couple times. He never grew potatoes. You know,
He
never-
did try potatoes.
Yeah, I did. I don't remember
way
that.
later on, yeah.
Okay, no, I don't
But
remember.
that was an issue, no.
Okay, I don't remember him ever doing that, but okay, he might have. But
So-
it's not easy to grow potatoes.
No,
You know,
you have to have the right soil.
you have to have the right dirt and everything. And he probably knew he
And I grow
didn't.
potatoes.
Yeah. He was, as I said, he was a very quiet man, a very, very nice man.
Joan, would I be right in saying that your father, how old was when he passed?
84.
84.
They were both 84, and they died 1 month apart.
And you are the matriarch of the family right now.
I know. When my sister Marilyn died, she said, "You were going to be the matriarch." That's okay. I really don't want to be. I mean, that means nothing to me. You know, I don't want to be the oldest and the last.
Would you say, without embarrassing you, that so many of your nieces really look up to you?
What?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't
Would
understand.
you say that, what I said, without embarrassing you, would you say that now, the role that you have, that so many of your nieces think the world of you?
I would say all of your nieces.
Oh,
And
thank you. That is a
nephews.
very
And
embarrassing
nephews.
question. I would never,
And nephews.
I would never answer that. But thanks, Janine. Thanks, Marilyn. And let's see it, John. Yeah.
And you know, back to your mom for a minute.
Yeah.
She was ahead of her time, realizing how serious smoking was so bad for you. She was ahead of her time.
She was ahead of her time in a lot of things.
Yes,
Yeah.
she was.
She really was, and
Cutting the fat off the meat.
I smoked for 37 years. That's a long time. I've quit 32 years ago. So I have a mild emphysema, and the doctor said, if you didn't quit, you'd probably be dead. And I said, well, I quit so long ago. He said, you still did the damage.
Yeah.
So that's really bad for you. But you know, when we were back in those days, everybody smokes. You weren't cool unless you did. But I also started when I was 13, which is really stupid. But I thought it was cool, you know. So don't ever smoke. Don't let your kids smoke. And the only reason I quit smoking is I had to have thyroid surgery, and I had to quit smoking for 6 weeks. So I did, and a week after the surgery, I started smoking again, and I thought, if I ever had to do this again, I probably wouldn't go back. Thinking that, but 10 years later, I had to do it again. So that's when I quit for good. I never went back. And it was hard, but now I can't even imagine smoking. You know, you don't smoke, do you?
No.
Okay. No, good for you. Good for you.
Jan, you touched on something about David, the father. This is a great interview because we're talking about a great man. I went to visit him on a Thursday, and a whole day was staying in one of those assisted living, and I wheeled him around in a wheelchair, and he asked you a question, and Joan answered it. He said, I've done everything. I've got kids, I've got kids, their kids, and I got more. I've done everything. Now it's time. Saturday he died.
Yeah. See, it was what I was saying, when he waited for November 3rd, he was ready to go.
Yeah.
I really think he hung on for that, to be the same day as his son. I believe that. I have another interesting story that this is not about my mom and dad, it's about my sister. Peggy, who was 2 years younger than me, had breast cancer, and she had it for 5 years and was on chemo for 5 years. And she had it really bad. So anyway, she died she was buried the day before her daughter's wedding. Imagine this, it's really tough. So we have the funeral on Friday, Saturday's the wedding, and the girls all come down the aisle crying their eyes out, and it was Michelle's wedding. You all met Michelle, I think. And Peggy loved baby tea roses, and that's what Michelle carried. So I don't know if it's a tradition here, but in Chicago, the bride always gives their mother a flower, after the wedding ceremony. So Peggy wasn't there, so she gave it to me. And I was absolutely thrilled that she did that. So I put it in a little vase, and I put it on the table next to our bed. And it was there for several years. So it was all dried up, but still in one piece, but all dried up. So that year, my sister Marilyn and I both had breast cancer scares. We were going to have a test. So I wake up that morning, the flower is open. And this is not an exaggeration. I can tell you, he shared my room. So that flower was open. And we went for our breast cancer test. Marilyn had cancer, I did not. And Peggy always said to me, you won't have bad breast cancer because I have it for both of us. People think I make that up about the flower opening. It really did. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a miracle.
Joan maintains a tradition, an Irish tradition, that the male from birth is the favorite. We went to Ireland, and we had to wait one time for our bed and breakfast to come down, because her son was late coming down for breakfast. So we had to sit at the breakfast table waiting for her son to get served. And when Richard was born, Joan's prayers were answered.
What? I can't hear you, Jack. It's really hard.
And when her son was born, her prayers were answered.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
She got the Irish son.
I love my daughter, too.
Can't forget her.
Grandma loved Michael.
Yes, she
Michael-
did.
Michael was the prized grandchild.
Firstborn.
Everyone gets a piece of gum. Michael gets the whole pack.
Yeah. That's the truth, Joan.
You told me that. I never knew that.
Oh, yeah, we knew it.
Oh, that's so funny.
It's a fine Irish tradition, because I was just spoiled with that.
Yeah. I didn't think that I raised Richard any different than Joanna. I didn't.
You weren't here. You weren't your husband.
I wasn't my what?
You weren't your husband.
Whatever.
I'm only kidding.
I know.
Does anyone else have any questions you want to ask?
I'd like to, Aunt Joan, will you tell me a little bit more about your mom Hannah, how she was when you were younger? Because I only
Yes,
a little bit, and she was a little bit more stern.
Janine, you're right, and she has that rep. She was really a very sweet woman when we were growing up. She was wonderful to us. She was very strict, yes, but she was not domineering. And even as a young adult, and believe me, I really liked to party. I would be out till all hours of the night. Sometimes I met my dad going to work when I was coming home, and she never butted in. She stayed out of it. But she was a good mom. I remember as a little girl asking her questions like I really can't say some of them because I'd be embarrassed. But I have long toes, and some people. Does anybody in your family have long toes?
Not that I know
Sarah
of.
does.
I like this. So my mom had them, and I used to cry because they were so ugly, and I sometimes would trip over throw rugs. And my brothers would tell me, yeah, you could hang out in the trees like the monkeys, and I used to think they were terrible. And she said, Joan, they're just jealous. It means you're coming from royalty.
It's true. O'Sullivan was a Irish royal family.
Wait, what was that?
The O'Sullivan is a Irish royal family in Munster,
Oh,
going back centuries at least.
Well, she might have been serious, but she was really trying to comfort me because I hated my toes, you know. But she was really good, Janine. I know when I think my brother David's death really kind of did her in. Where are you?
Right here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that kind of did her in. And she got to be a little more stern and cranky as she got older, but she wasn't always like that.
As you describe your parents, I just thought that I think my dad took after your mom. Would you agree or no? Or
Yes.
Was it both? Yeah, your mom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think Marilyn was a lot like my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I think myself is a big combination.
I can see that.
Peggy,
She was kind of a wild child.
I'd say she's a combination too.
Yeah.
And David, I think he was a Sullivan.
David looked like a Sullivan,
Yeah.
so good looking.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was a Sullivan. David and I were the Sullivans, and
Tall.
Marilyn and Peggy were Bresnahans. And Bill, I always thought
Wasn't it?
he was a combination. I never really think he looked like either a lot. Do you?
More like your dad,
You think so?
as opposed to the Sullivans.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's neat.
We had a great life growing up together. We were a very tight family, and yeah, I miss them all. When my son got married, and there wasn't one of them to attend, not a brother, not a sister, not a mom and dad, not even an aunt and uncle. It's not nice to be the only one left. Hey, Marilyn, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
She is as well. So if you can hold your family tight, do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I suppose the Irish tradition and the males are more favored. That's the old days. I don't think that's today.
Because they were the ones that took over the farm and the land.
Yeah.
So you had to
But
make
that-
sure. It
one
was probably
time-
a survival.
Yeah. One time we were in Ireland, and like the kids were, I think they were like, I don't know, maybe 13 and 15 or something, maybe younger, maybe 10 and 12, 13. So we were in a hotel in Ireland, and I think this is the time you're talking about, Richard. Joanne and I were in the restaurant waiting for them, and then they came down, and then they brought our food and served them first. Even though we were sitting there for half an hour waiting, they served the males first. I was like, I'm more of a chauvinist than that. I like that.
Hey, John. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that.
You know, here's something I want to throw in. The morals of the people back when I married Joan 53 years ago. Joan said it several times, but things have changed. There's an Americanization thing, you know, with losing the nationalism. But back then, the nationalism was very true, and they were raised very morally proper.
No, we was very Catholic.
Very Catholic.
And you better not miss Mass or you get your legs cracked. Yeah.
How do you think they would feel about today? America today, Ireland today, or just what's going on?
How would they feel?
Yeah, how do you think they would feel?
I think they would think it's very different. I mean, I even can see the difference from 30 years ago. It's way, way different, way more modern, way more foreigners living there. You know, when they were young, you know, they were born in 1902, so 120 years ago. It was certainly was not like it is now. And even for us, 120 years from now, would we come and look back and say, oh, wow, has it changed, you know? Yeah, I'm thinking that they may not like what it's turned into, you know.
America or Ireland?
Ireland.
Yeah.
And you're thinking about America today? Oh my God, they're probably turning over in their graves. There's so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Joan, I have a question regarding that. Because when they were young, they were oppressed by the English.
Correct.
But now they have their independence.
Mm-hmm.
The Ireland, not Northern Ireland, is still part of the UK. But do you think that they would be happy with the independence that Grandpa and and Hannah, at that time, they had to, if they were fighting against the English, they couldn't say so because it was, but now that it would be free, would they feel a sense of pride in
Yes.
their efforts in the
Yes.
beginning that may have been quiet, but then it would be like more of a silence pride because you couldn't be too jovial about it because, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are I think they'd be very proud.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Ireland was their country, and we wouldn't like if Russia came over here and said, okay, half of you are, or all of you for a while, you're Russian. We wouldn't like it. And I noticed when we were there the last time, this is interesting to me, is the Southern Irish, they don't really care about the Northern Irish like they used to. Okay, you're on your Northern Irish fight, that's fine. And 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that wasn't the case.
No.
They still had a very huge dislike
Yeah.
for the English being in Northern Ireland. I don't think they care.
Do you think there's more Catholic, Protestant, or English, Irish?
What? I don't understand the question.
Okay, would it be more of the troubles being, carried on because of the Irish, English dislike, or the Catholic, Protestant? They always say it's Catholic.
Was it
Protestant.
religion?
I think it's more the Irish than religion.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what they.
Religion enters into it. I think it's secondary.
Yeah, that's what they would say.
Nobody wants to be suppressed.
Yeah.
And that's human nature. That's not, that's not just the Irish. That's, look at when Berlin, in Germany when they had the wall up. You can imagine how they felt when that wall came down. Oh my God. I think it's kind of the same thing.
Great analogy.
So,
The recent movie Belfast.
yes, I have not seen it yet.
Oh, you must see it.
Yeah, I do. I want to.
Joan, we've seen it and liked it a lot. And I think it told, from the little bit I know, and very much how the Catholics were repressed definitely in Northern Ireland. There was such a division there. It's very well done. The movie, I think Belfast.
Yeah, I do want to see that.
Was well done.
And there were times in Ireland, and I know you guys are pretty much history buffs, when the English owned all the big, huge estates, and the Irish were the tenants, if you want to call them that, and they didn't produce, they were out. And especially during the potato famine, their houses were knocked down, burned down, you were thrown out in the street to starve to death. While England was exporting all their potatoes to England, and these people were dying. It to this day it bothers me. I don't like it. So they had every right to be infuriated and fight back. Why not? And when they got the South free, people were not happy. What they wanted, they got what they could, and they did the best they could. And lucky to get that. But I don't think they'll ever be united. Do you?
Well, I think it's inevitable, but it's a long historical process. Like even 100 years ago, they fought for a complete united Ireland, and we're still we haven't reached that yet today. So I think it takes decades, centuries. The English came in the 1100s, originally. So it's a very long
process. Yeah. But I don't think the people have it in them anymore. I don't think they care. I think the people in Northern Ireland, they're just like, okay, it's what it is. And the people in the South don't care.
Yeah.
That's my
In
feeling.
the South, I feel like they have, they kind of turned their back on the nationalist Republican cause, of united. But
I don't know. It's a big problem. I won't be here to see it resolved. You probably won't be either.
Let's see.
I can't think of anything else. Probably when we're walking out of here, I'm going to think of a million things.
I have one question just about religious. Were they very Catholic?
Very.
Okay. And it wasn't more about just kind of tradition and or was it or probably both?
They both had a very deep faith.
Yeah.
which was something instilled in them when they were kids, and then it was instilled in us as well. And I would say that I have a strong Catholic faith, but probably not as strong as theirs was, because mine has waned a little bit. I mean, still strong, but not like them. They were very, 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 very religious, which I think most of the Irish immigrants were.
So how often would they go to mass or do confession or things like
Oh
that?
my God, a lot.
A lot.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but I haven't gone to confession since I got married. I mean, I don't really feel the need to do it. I don't think I'm going to go to hell. But yeah, they did. And as kids, we were taken once a month. You know, we just did it. We thought that's what we were supposed to do. Yeah. So, but I mean, they weren't like holy rollers, and they just did it. You know, it was part of their life. My mom would go to mass in the morning sometimes. My dad worked, so he didn't. But they always went on every Sunday. You know. There was a time when you probably remember this, but women had to cover their heads. So as a kid, I did. I had to wear a scarf or a hat or something. Thank God that went away.
Do they do the rosary or things like that?
Yeah, we did. In fact, my mother had. Do you remember? The Lady of Fatima? You familiar with that?
I think
Okay,
so.
so there was a big statue, and it would travel from house to house, and then whoever had the statue would have their friends and relatives come and say the rosary every night. Maybe it would stay a week, and then it would go to somebody else's house or maybe another neighborhood. Do you remember that, Marilyn?
Oh, yeah, I definitely remember that.
Yeah. I remember kneeling on the floor, and my knees were killing me. I mean, can I sit down and do this? Yeah. Do you remember it, Dick?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but a lot of that stuff's gone. You know. Sometimes I think in what's happening in the world, God's just mad at us. You know, you guys are getting bad.
It stops.
Yeah.
Faith.
As I say, I'll probably remember a lot more after I'm not sitting here. And I'm sorry for that.
Well, I think we've got an absolute wealth of
I learned
information from you.
You think so?
A lot.
No, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joan.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. You're very welcome. I wish I could do more.
Oh no, that was fantastic. I mean, we've already been going for a little more than an hour, which
We
is,
have?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
fantastic. We've got a lot
Gosh.
of
Okay.
stories, a lot of information. Is there anything else anyone wants to
Back to my house?
Yeah, can anyone think of any more questions?
before we wrap up?
Yeah.
Bessie's coming here. She's on her way here. If
Oh,
we-
cool.
If we want to go meet somewhere. That's what you were saying, Aunt Joan? Aunt Joan, Bessie's on her way here if we want to go meet somewhere.
Okay. Did she just text you?
Yes.
Oh, well, we'll talk about that when we turn this off.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
just-
Yeah. Any more
wrap it
questions?
before we wrap up? Anything
Oh, I'm
else?
sorry. I thought you meant like about what we're doing next. No. No, I think that's it. That was.
Is this a wrap?
Yeah, that's a wrap.
It's a wrap.
Thank you so much.